Hi there, my name's Kevin Mullen, and I'm one of the neighbors of Allimax farm in West Hempfield Township, who has been mentioned in the 3 videos put up by Allimax farm owner or co-owner Joseph Meyer. Mr. Meyer's done a great service by telling the public what it was like to be in operation in our neighborhood, and I thought, as one of the neighbors not mentioned by name, but mentioned by locale in his videos, that I would take the opportunity to describe what it is like to be a landowner adjacent to Mr. Meyer's operation. I was at the zoning hearing board meeting in 2008 where Mr. Meyer described what he wanted to do on this property. The things he was given approval to do were to give horseback riding lessons, have trail rides, and that was about it. He talked about a lot of other things that he likes to do, but he didn't ask for approval for those things. He was given approval to have 17 horses. At that hearing, I asked Mr. Meyer what sort of impact his traffic would have on our neighborhood, since I live right across the street from him. He assured me and the Township Zoning Board that his business would have little impact on our neighborhood, that most of the people who took lessons from him were children who would carpool, so there might be 2 or 3 children in one car. He pooh-poohed any lasting effect that his business would have on us, that it would be minimally invasive to the neighborhood. He was also asked about rides that he was providing on a hay wagon that was drawn by 2 horses, and he was advertising parties that he had where he had pulled people for hay rides. His response then was that he was trying to sell those horses, and if he sold the horses, then that wouldn't be an issue. It was then that I learned that Mr. Meyer is a master wordsmith. He chooses his words exceedingly carefully because he understands the meaning of these words. Mr. Meyer also spent a great deal of time at that meeting talking about manure management and how the local farmers would be begging for his horse manure, and so that it wouldn't be piling up and it wouldn't be a problem. I can tell you that subsequent to that, Mr. Meyer may have removed the horse manure from that property once or twice a year. It would accumulate in mammoth piles those few times when he cleaned the stalls. And those piles would draw flies, and they would have runoff that would run downhill into the yard of a family that lives on this property as well, but unrelated to this business, that has 6 small children. Mr. Meyer apparently didn't care that the runoff from his horse manure pile was going into their yard. I was initially a very nice neighbor to Mr. Meyer. I loaned him my truck to pull his horse trailer to an event that he had contracted to do when his own truck didn't work. When he returned, he asked me how much I wanted for the use of it, and I said not to worry, let my girls have a horseback ride when nobody else is over there sometime. And he said thank you, and he was fine with that. Over the course of time, I would use my garden tractor to clear snow from the property so that access for emergency vehicles like fire trucks and ambulances would be possible, and also that the animals would be able to get out of that barn in the case of a fire or other emergency. My daughter Alexa would also shovel snow from in front of the door leading into this barn so that people could get in safely when it snowed or it was icy out. We spent a considerable amount of effort doing this because we're good neighbors, and I was born and raised on a farm. I was not born on a farm. I was raised on a farm from the age of 7 or 8. It was my grandparents' farm before that. And I'm familiar with horses. I'm familiar with the safety procedures necessary to be careful of when you have large animals around. And this was just common sense to me. And Mr. Meyer was never able to say thank you or make a kind gesture to me for doing these things for him. I didn't expect them, but they sure would have been nice. And moving forward, as his business started to grow a little bit, his neighbors or his customers started knocking on the doors to my house. We noticed that his sign for Allimax trail rides pointed directly at the side door to our house. And we started having serious issues with his customers parking on our property and leaving, knocking on our doors, walking around our property, harassing our animals, taking pictures of our animals, sitting at our picnic table. His customers walked into our house. They walked in and sat on our furniture. All the while that this is going on, we implored Mr. Meyer to do something about this, to keep his customers off our property. We got zippo response from this man. He didn't apologize. He didn't express regret that his customers were trespassing on our private land, and he never made any effort whatsoever to diminish the effects or the occurrence of his people coming on our property. We finally were exasperated after repeated efforts to get him to do something, and we called the township. We asked the township to do something about this since they had given this man the variance to operate. We also called his landlord, Don Hess, who owns the property. Don Hess was initially very responsive. He came right over and he took down the offending sign that was pointing at our house. A simple act of courtesy that Mr. Meyer could not bring himself to do. Related to this, as a good businessman, do you want your customers harassing your neighbors and making your presence not welcome in a neighborhood? All Mr. Meyer had to do was to say one sentence at the beginning of his customer orientation for each person that came for a trail ride. All he had to say was, "Hey, did you park on the right side of the road? Are you parked on our property? Because you're not allowed to park on the neighbor's property for my business." Okay, so that's 3 sentences. How long did it take me to say that? 10 seconds? Mr. Meyer or his business partner Amber Glass-Glau or Amber Meyer or whatever her name really is, neither one of them could say those words to their customers to keep them off my property. This is what it's like to be a neighbor for Mr. Meyer. Mr. Meyer's horses repeatedly got loose. They got loose so often that we began calling the police every time his horses got loose because he was not doing anything to fix the situation. His horses traveled up and down Kames Hill Road. They traveled through my yard. They traveled through other people's yards, causing damage and divots. Mr. Meyer never apologized. Mr. Meyer never offered to come into those yards and fix the damage caused by his animals. He never had a word to say. This is what it's like to work and live next to Mr. Meyer's operation. Another neighbor complained to Mr. Meyer's business associate, Amber Glass-Glau, or Amber Meyer as she sometimes goes by, that the horses were coming in his yard. Her response to him was, "Don't buy a house next to a horse farm." And this person has lived in this house for over 50 years next to this farm, long before there was a horse farm there. When he complained again, she told him to go to hell. Twice. And she was maybe 19 years old at the time. This is what it's like to live next to Allimax Farm. When we complain to the township to do something, it's because this person runs roughshod over the local township ordinances, and they have no regard whatsoever for what they say they're going to do and what they agree to do when they get a variance. It takes the township all they can to try and document what this person does so that they can issue a citation. The legal process is really lengthy, and Mr. Meyer is an excellent adversary when it comes to using the legal system to his advantage. I could go on and on and on and talk about what it's like to be a neighbor to this person. But really what I want to say is that we're not anti-horse. I grew up on a horse farm, like I said. I have a great love of large animals and small animals. This isn't about us being against the commercial use of horses, for God's sakes. This is about holding a man responsible for doing what he says he's going to do. Pure and simple. He wants to blame animal rights activists for the death of his horses. I think the investigation should look at the cheap, shoddy, moldy hay he feeds his animals and any grain he might have fed them. Where did it come from? There are all sorts of places to look closer to home for the death of these animals. It's not necessary to look at neighbors, former employees, or animal rights activists. To suggest that I or any of our other neighbors had anything to do with this is an abomination and a delusion. As I was quoted as saying in the Lancaster newspapers, because I wrote a letter to